show's Avoiding Babylon, and it frustrates me because I really like the producer of the show, but I can't stand the host of the show. The host, Anthony, just constantly says the absolute dumbest shit I've ever seen. For example, one of his tweets was that the one criminal on the cross who was saved because Mary prayed for him, and I'm like, I don't know if he's just trying to piss Protestants off or if he genuinely believes that or what, but it's just constant with him.
I stand by that. I stand by that. That was what got me to say the thing.
We had to start with that, of course.
I know.
Thank you to Taffy for putting that little intro together for us. Yeah, it is interesting because it did absolutely start as a little bit of a troll, so much so that it got James White's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And James White did like an entire 2-hour sermon on my tweet. And it was like, wait, this was just like a throwaway line. It was like, here's what it is. When
you even texted me, you're like, I can't believe that throwaway tweet got that much attention.
It's because, okay, so my issue with the thief on the cross thing, that evangelicals, I'm not going to say Protestants, because there's a very big difference in like historical Protestantism and evangelicals. And we'll get into, your, what you were saying with the Anglo-Catholics on the debate and stuff. We'll get into that. But the evangelical approach to finding like the lowest common denominator, and it's like, well, the thief on the cross was saved, and it's like, well, okay, but just because the thief on the cross was saved that way doesn't mean you should just base your entire theology off of one throwaway line in scripture. So it's like, I just wanted to annoy a Protestant, so I was like, yeah, no, the thief was saved because Mary was praying from the foot of the cross, and that freaking tweet blew up. It blew up.
It got all of us. We were all like, "What are you talking about, man?"
The funniest part was I was because you did that on one of your Monday podcasts, and I was listening to it the next day, and all of a sudden I hear "Avoiding Babylon," and then you rip on Anthony. I was like, "Oh, this is."
We were so excited to play it on the show the next day.
I'm sure.
So all right, so you just were on Tim Pool's show. It was you, Jay Dyer, Tim Gordon. And I said to you in the green room, like, I personally would not want to debate either of those guys. They're both they both like regularly do debates. Tim, if he specializes in a very particular area, he will like obliterate his opponent. But Jay, I kind of knew Jay was going to do what he did, where Jay, because he spent time in traditional Catholicism and then went to Orthodoxy, he knows the internal arguments amongst traditional Catholics. And because Tim is like kind of caught in a position of having to defend some of the things that Catholics find controversial within the church since the Second Vatican Council, Jay knew that was a tricky spot for Tim to defend, so he jumped right into that. But he wound up going into such minutia that it kind of ruined the conversation for the whole show, in my opinion. Like, for the normie listener, like, I don't think the average person had any idea what the hell you guys were talking about.
No. I mean, also, the thing was, going into the debate, my understanding was that it wasn't going to get so into ecclesiology, that it was going to be a lot more about sociology and the church's place in the modern world. And I know that's where Tim Pool was going, especially was how does the Catholic Church fit in? How does the Orthodox Church fit in? Which one is best for society, basically, is I think where Tim was kind of at. And then Jay and Tim Gordon used it just as an opportunity to go at each other about very specific little bits of Orthodox and Catholic. It wasn't even theology, it was ecclesiology.
Yeah, it was very esoteric for like, so it was entertaining for a guy like me because I understand those debates, and it's interesting to watch a Catholic and an Orthodox.
And both of them.
And I know both. Like we've had Jay on the show twice. Tim Gordon is like one of my good friends. So it's like for somebody like me, I was interested in it, but I know like the average listener was like, what the hell am I tuning into here? But I was interested to know, okay, so like everybody's throwing around like you're a Freemason. Like I am curious like how you came about to your Anglo-Catholic position. Was this through study? Like how did you arrive at the conclusions you have?
Sure. So as I was telling you guys before the show, I in college studied medieval studies and religious studies. I had a whole bunch of minors because I just had a very interdisciplinary major. But while I was in college, I had grown up non-denominational, and after studying a little bit more, I came around to Methodism because I felt like it was I like a lot of the theology. I like a lot of the way that it views scripture. And I had some serious problems with Catholic history more than anything, more even than theology. And then as I got out of college, I was a 2020 graduate, so COVID year, and I was sitting around watching National Treasure in my parents' living room in probably like April of 2020. And I went, you know what? I wonder what the whole Freemasonry thing is about. So I decided, what better way to learn about Freemasonry than to become one? My curiosity primarily was coming from a place as a historian of, so there's the Templar connection. How real is that? Is there actually a connection between what we know of as Freemasonry today and the Knights Templar post 1314? And I'll be honest, as I have gone through it, I have not found much of a connection to exist. Yeah. It seems like it's mostly symbolic. There is a very interesting poem from around the year 1400 called the Regius poem that might be the connective tissue, but we don't know so far. But yeah, so I was a Freemason for a while. I still am, and my priest doesn't like that. He's not happy with me. But no, over the last year or so, I started, as I got a little bit more into the apologetic sphere, as I started learning a little bit more about how the church works and functions, it occurred to me that there is a reason that Protestant evangelicalism, some of the mainline churches, have fallen so far away from what Christianity was up until about 100 years ago. And in my opinion, that reason is that we left behind the apostolic succession. We left behind having an actual structure of the church that allows for a group of bishops, a group of priests, when somebody is out of line, to go and kind of pull them back in and say, hey, you either need to stop teaching heresy or you're going to be excommunicated from the church. So I decided, all right, I want to go and look at the apostolic churches. And I have, to be honest, I have a long history of not gelling with the Roman Catholic Church. So that wasn't exactly on the table, but I started looking into Lutheranism, Orthodoxy, Anglicanism, and I was baptized Episcopalian. So when I was like, maybe I'll just go back to that. It's Methodism sprung out of that anyway. So maybe I'll go back to the Episcopal Church. And then I went and looked and I was like, what happened here? Yeah. It's like the Community, the TV show Community, the episode where Donald Glover walks into the room and everything's on fire and I was like, what happened to this church in the last 30 years? Yeah. So I decided that couldn't be it. And I was really frustrated. And then somebody in my audience was like, hey, have you ever heard of Anglican Catholicism? And I went, no, what's that? Started looking into it. Turns out there's a church right up the street and one of the only 3 in Pennsylvania, I guess. And I was like, well, that's a sign. So I went for Easter service. And I was like, you know what? This is awesome. I like that we have a lot of the Catholic aesthetic and the liturgy. I like that we have a Book of Common Prayer. I like that the priest is so open and involved in the congregation. And it was kind of cool to see a congregation that was people my age with kids up through people who can barely walk anymore. So I decided that was something I really liked, and I started diving into it. And at the end of the day, that's where I feel the most at home.
Did you grow up with a lot of anti-Catholic? Because there's different types of, like, if you're growing up in the American church, there's a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment in the American Protestant church. Does some of that stem from that, you think?
No, I had a very good relationship with Catholicism growing up. Half of my family are Italian Catholics. Half of
we don't like those here.
Well, so my grandfather and my grandmother were very Catholic. A lot of my aunts and uncles still are. About half of them ended up switching over more towards Protestantism and ended up pretty much non-denominational because I think they had that experience of Catholicism growing up where they were like, I don't know that I like what I'm doing here. So for me, most of my resistance to the Roman Church came about in college.
What was it about Catholic history, or what is it about Catholic history that kind of gave you that opposition?
There's a few key moments. One is the donation of Constantine. I don't like that the church forged a document in order to secure temporal authority over the kings of Europe. And then, of course, the Dictatus Papae just piling on to that same thing, and then it turning out to be a forgery many years later. Another one is I did not love the way that the church conducted the European Crusades. I felt like reading about specifically the Siege of Bitzier and what happened there, Arnaud Amalric saying the admittedly badass line, "Kill them all, God will recognize his own." But when you realize what that meant and what happened there, that bothered me a lot. So I felt like looking back at, and then of course the murder of Jan Hus and some of the other early reformers, it looked to me like there was a period between the end of the 11th century and up through the 16th century where I felt like the Catholic Church fell away. Like there was something going wrong. Maybe the schism had something to do with it. But I looked at it and I said, okay, you have to admit the Protestant Reformation didn't come out of nowhere. It was bubbling for 500 years before eventually Martin Luther nailed 95 Theses to a door. So there were a few things, and I think most of all, it's probably the dogmatism about certain things that just don't seem like they should necessitate excommunication and things like that, like the bodily assumption of Mary.
Okay, so okay, so what convinced me, because like you were saying, like a lot of the things that you see, like, you know, churches falling away from like their historic Christianity, things like that. One of the big things that convinced me was seeing the church stand firm on the moral stance on contraception. It was like I watched every single Christian denomination give in to this thing, right? Like it was like, oh, well, married couples, you know, it started with the Lambeth Conference in 1930. The Anglicans allowed it first. Then every single Protestant denomination, one by one, basically fell to it and said, okay, we'll allow for contraception. And it was only the Catholic Church that stood firm and said, no, you guys don't understand what you're doing here. If you allow for contraception, what you're doing is allowing a spouse to use their spouse. You're separating the procreative act from the unitive act. And once you do that, you're using sex just as an act of pleasure. Now, if a married couple can use sex as just an act of pleasure, who's to say an unmarried couple can't? And it would just, I see every problem we have in modern society stems from that issue. And part of me seeing Catholicism as true was like, man, it just took such moral courage to stand up in the face during the sexual revolution to not cave into the pressures that were coming upon the church, because it was everywhere, that pressure, you know. But so that was like the start of it. And then the further I went back, just seeing how the church actually formed the Western world, and seeing how even the church's stance on the relationship between men and women. So if you go back to like the Roman Empire, a lot of people think like, because you'll hear people talk about how we get democracy from the Greeks, and, you know, we all have this Romanitas in us. Like we still speak of the Roman, like this question that goes around. It's like, oh, how many times a day do you think of the Roman Empire about men? So we have this idea of like being Roman that makes a lot of people in the modern world think that the world we're in today just kind of came about, but they don't recognize how much of a part Christianity and the Catholic Church specifically played in that. It's like like women were seen as a receptacle for men to dump their fluids in the Roman world. Like they had the same name for their mouth, anus, and vagina. Like a woman was just a toilet for a man. But it took the Catholic Church actually starting to teach on marriage and things like that actually forms the Western mind and like gets men away from that savagery. But as you get further on and you start getting these groups start breaking away, you kind of do see exactly what you were saying with the Protestants. And it happens with every single group, including the Orthodox, including, I mean, every group I can think of, where they just find something that they're willing to buckle on, whether it's remarriage in the Orthodox Church and contraception or whatever it is. It's just that, like, it seemed like the Catholic Church is the only one who maintained that moral foundation throughout all of history, even after the crazy changes that happened in the 60s that Jay and Tim were getting into.
Sure. Yeah. And I respect that a lot. Like I said, you know, there's a reason I ended up Anglican Catholic, and I'm still learning a lot. I've been talking a lot with priests and other faith leaders in the community, trying to understand more and more where everything comes from, what our positions are on things. Because coming from a Methodist background, it's like we have a lot of the same stuff, but also obviously it's a lot more liberal. You know, I think, and for example, with the contraception issue, I asked my priest about that when I first started looking into the church, and he told me that there is not that basically the Anglican Catholic position on it is that you should not avoid having children in general. So vasectomy is not a good thing. Hysterectomy is not a good thing. Using contraception all the time, even once you're in a position to have children, not a good thing. But also that, you know, there is something of pleasure to that experience. God created it that way for a reason. And that if you're a husband and a wife, you know, you don't have to be trying for a kid constantly all the time, just as long as you're not avoiding being fruitful and multiplying. So like, you know, don't have just one kid, don't just have 2 kids and then stop, but also like don't have 12 kids if you can't afford to have them was kind of where
I think that's a slippery slope.
Yeah,
I think that's a slippery slope. But all right. So
I will say also one thing that I think you might appreciate about, I don't know how much you know about Anglo-Catholicism, but it actually was a step back. It was a step towards conservatism out of the Episcopal Church. So the 1978 Missouri Synod, we basically said, okay, ordination of women, that's a bridge too far. We're leaving a lot of things up to pious opinion, but that's too much.
Yeah.
So we're going to step away. We're going to separate. And we, in doing that, maintained our ordination going back to both Aristobulus of Britain and Augustine. So that was kind of the way that we look at it.
Yeah, no, I know. Because Calvin Robinson's he's like an Anglican Catholic. So that's what they were. So that's why I wanted to get to. Like, so they started bringing up the branch theory, and that's kind of Calvin Robinson's position, where it seemed like you really didn't even know where they were going with that. Like,
I wasn't familiar with the terminology.
Yeah, it's basically what you're describing, where they try to trace their lineage back to a bishop and say that the Catholic Church branches off into all these different branches, but they still have valid ordinations and things like that. But there is something to, even with Calvin Robinson, when he got ordained, he wanted to make sure he was ordained by a bishop whose ordination was recognized by the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
It's like because what it comes down to for me essentially is people can claim whatever they want, but if you don't have a valid priesthood, then even if you claim to believe in the sacraments and stuff like that, you're going to run into problems. Now with Jay, I watched you brought something up to Jay where you even pointed out to him that his bishop or something recognized you're right. And what did he say to that?
Yeah, I found a document that comes from the Anglican Catholic Church, and it basically was going through in 1922 through 1936, I believe. There was a movement within the Orthodox community to decide, do we recognize the ordination of the Anglican Church? And this is, of course, before any of the stuff that happened to the Episcopal Church and the Church of England, the Anglican communion as a whole. And basically unanimously, they went, yeah, we don't see any problem with the ordination process of the Anglican Church at all. So I posted that, and it started with the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, and that was Meletios at the time. And I posted that, and I said, hey, Jay, granted, you had me during the debate. Like, I'll fully admit that. I will cede you won that debate, but you might find this interesting. And I posted a couple of screenshots from that letter. And I think he only read the very first one because he said Meletios was a Freemason and the opinion of one ecumenical patriarch doesn't matter. And then I said, well, you really should have read the rest of the thread where it goes through, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, the Patriarch of Alexandria, the Hierarch of Cyprus, the Hierarch of Romania. They all agreed with this. And he just said goodbye and then blocked me.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency now. And so this is kind of how I see everybody. Everybody kind of just wants to disregard what the hierarchy says and just follow their own thing. So it's
which sounds a lot like branch theory to me, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jay, as much as he wants to claim the Orthodox Church is the one true church, sounds to me like he's just a sedevacantist, essentially. Yeah. Like he's a sedevacantist with a couple of differing opinions. But all right, we'll get off this topic because it's just whatever. But what? Oh, unless you got stuff.
Well,
Rob.
I was curious. So you said you first came to the Methodism in college. What were you raised as? What did you grow up in?
Kind of non-denominational, but with a Baptist. My stepdad was a Baptist. My mom grew up a Catholic. and probably wouldn't call herself a Catholic anymore, but she's just kind of the same kind of thing, like just non-denominational Protestant. Because it's not that big a deal. Like, God's a big deal in their lives. They're definitely Christians. They care quite a bit, but the church structure itself hasn't really mattered. And I've been trying to actually get them to come to church with me, start going back, because they didn't have the same church to go to, and my mom didn't love my stepdad's church. My stepdad didn't want to go to the churches my mom was okay with. So it just was a whole thing. So I was raised non-denominational for all intents and purposes. I went to a lot of different churches. I've been to Catholic masses. I've been to Orthodox masses. I've been to Protestant sermons. Just kind of, once I got to college, I was like, I think that there's got to be a way of doing this properly. And I decided that I just really liked what John Wesley and Charles Wesley were about.
Yeah, I think you're going to keep, look, the reason I don't want to keep pressing you is just because I don't want to have like an argument or a debate on here. I think you should just keep going. Like, I think if you just keep going and looking back to like how, especially because you're a history major, like if you study the early centuries of Catholicism and the Catholic Church, like you kind of see how like the kingdom of heaven on earth is very much a part of the gospel, and what the church is actually doing is spreading the kingdom on earth. Yeah. So when the church is building those cathedrals, like those cathedrals are meant to be the kingdom on earth, you know, and the Pope wearing all of his garb is meant to signify the kingship of Christ and all those things. Like the symbolism of Catholicism is unmistakable. And I think even the non-Catholics, like you watched it during the election of Pope Leo, it's like the whole world was looking to Rome. It's like, what the hell is going on here? It's like, regardless of what any ecumenical patriarch in the East says, or regardless of whatever an Anglican bishop says, everybody still looks to the Bishop of Rome, including like the secular West. When Francis was in and he would change something, they'd be like, oh, that's it. The church has changed. Like everybody's waiting on the Church of Rome to make a decision on things, even to this day. And has a lot to do with how much the Church of Rome played a part in forming the culture we're in today.
Oh, definitely. And I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I think that what I find attractive about the Anglican position is basically that up until the 1500s, we're part of the Catholic Church, and we didn't consider ourselves Protestant. That Anglicans don't consider themselves part of the Reformation in the same way that Lutherans and Calvinists do. Because it really was just about the Council of Trent and some of the issues of papal supremacy.
Well,
Henry VIII was his own thing.
Okay.
Henry VIII did his own thing.
The Anglican Reformation.
We don't look to him.
Yeah, no, but he did start something.
He did,
and then that winds up coalescing in his successors, with Mary coming back in, and then Elizabeth after her.
And Elizabeth's interesting because we don't know a ton about what her personal beliefs were. It seems like it at that point became a very much a political thing. But I think what I appreciate about the philosophy of the time within the Anglican Church was basically them saying like, hey, our biggest problem here is the Pope claiming to be just unquestionable in so many aspects, because if the entire Catholic Church just follows along with whatever the Pope says, then that early church formula of the various bishops being able to have opinions and argue about things and kind of needing to respect the opinions of everybody, if everybody's just in lockstep with the Pope, that kind of takes away from that. I don't think
the church ever functioned that way. Even after papal supremacy was announced, though, there's always, we still have church councils that we come to.
If anything, it's only functioned that way in the last 60 years.
Yeah, it's been a bit rough in the past 60 years, but I don't think even after papal infallibility was declared, things like that, like the church has never functioned as a total monarchy where the Pope just unilaterally makes decisions until recent history. It's always been a collegial type thing, and especially when it comes to doctrine and things like that. But the church, it really would come down to, does Peter have a special grace given to him to not err?
I mean, the Anglican position is that there is papal primacy, but that it has gone too far into papal, at least as I understand it. But it's gone too far into papal supremacy, where it should basically, Peter was the top guy, but an entire church council would overrule a pope. And I think that that's kind of where where things got off the rails and why the Anglican Church came about was this recognition of, even if it wasn't at the point of being total yet, trying to stem that tide and say, wait, no, this isn't okay. And to that extent, I think you'll see a lot of Anglicans who will say that, especially Anglican Catholics, who will say that they would welcome communion with Rome and returning to the fold of the Roman Catholic Church if a few things were addressed.
Do you not see the absurdity of that, though? Like,
I don't.
Like, we'll come back to you if you do what we want. It's like, no, the seat of Rome is the one who says what you.
But that's my point. You know, that it's yeah. If the seat of Rome is wrong, what are you gonna? And we believe it's wrong. I mean,
yeah. Well, the thing is, you are kind of new to the whole looking even deeper into apostolic Christianity, so. Keep going. That's all I'm saying. Like, even just because you feel comfortable in a specific place, like, because what it should come down to is the truth. Like, if something's true or not. It shouldn't come down to, I don't like this thing. Like the hardest things in Catholicism, like even like you were saying, like the Assumption of Mary or the Immaculate Conception, things like that. Like if you think about the churches that don't believe in the Immaculate Conception, or the churches that don't believe in the sinlessness of Mary, you look at what the actual fruits of the church's belief that Mary was sinless were, and it is monasticism, right? So like the idea of holy virginity actually spurts from the belief that Mary was a perpetual virgin. So these monks would go out to the desert and take vows of celibacy and go live out in monasteries. And you wind up getting some of the most profound, the profound understanding of prayer and just the deepening of the Western mind in theology, things like that. Then once you break away from that, once you get to the time of the Reformation, that's when feminism starts encroaching in. And like, I mean, it's just, whatever. I'm not a great debater. I'm just saying these are the things that I had actually.
Either, yeah.
These are the things that had sparked me, like my thinking along the way. What did you? So you got out of college as a history major. What made you start a podcast?
COVID. I was working a digital marketing job because that was all I could really get. I was waiting to go to grad school. I had actually gotten accepted to the Bangor University in Wales. And I was going to go get my master's and end up being a professor. I was sitting at work, my last Friday at work, I think it was, and nothing to do, just scrolling on TikTok on my phone. And I saw a video that was like, what's a conspiracy theory you 100% believe in, but you can't prove? I had been working on a concept for a script, I think, for like a TV show or a novel. I can't remember exactly what I was working on, but it was the idea that like the national parks exist because they're a containment area for monsters. And so I made a little stupid TikTok about it. It got 7 million views. And so people were like, hey, you know, you should start a YouTube channel. You should start talking more about this stuff. And I did that. And at first it was just, hey, this is kind of cool. We have extra beer money for going out to the bar on the weekend, which isn't really something we could even do that much at the time because it was June of 2021. But no, it was like, hey, beer money, cool. And then after a few months, it started to grow. And then it got to a point where my best friend and I were like, hey, maybe we can do this. Maybe this is something we can actually do as a full-time job. We were both working 40 hours a week at the time. And yeah, it just kind of grew. We sat down and went, is this a risk that we can take? And we decided to go for it. And it was the best decision we ever made.
What was the first one that like blew up besides that TikTok?
Oh man. It was really once we started diving into missing 411 stuff, when we were probably a year and a half in. I can't remember if there was any one big YouTube. I have to give so much credit to Wendigoon. I don't know if you've watched any of his stuff, but he took us under his wing and exposed his audience to our stuff. And that just kind of all at once in November of, I want to say 2022, just like skyrocketed it. Suddenly we were getting, we went from 75,000 subscribers to 100,000 in like 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So right place, right time, knowing the right people. I think that was definitely what it was working with him. but yeah, after that, it was just kind of a steady growth period and trying to do our best and going from being a channel that was just kind of talking about fun, scary stories to basically doing academic research on them.
So how much time would you guys spend? How often do episodes come out and how much time do you guys spend doing them?
Oh God. I'd say probably 80 hours of work goes into each episode between the two of us, at least, if not 100. Really depends on which one.
What do you put them out? Once every other week or something?
Once every week.
Once a week.
Yeah. So it's usually me doing about 30 to 50 and my co-host doing about 30 to 50 on either end of it, depending on what we're looking at. Like the JonBenet Ramsey stuff, I'll sit there and stare at my screen probably for 70, 80 hours writing a script, and then he has to go do the same thing to edit it.
Have you guys had any blowouts?
Like videos?
Well, how long you guys been doing this since 2020, right? Have you guys had any
2021?
2021. Have you guys had
big
any
arguments?
Yeah, like big arguments, blowouts where you guys are just like, I don't know if we can continue with this.
Honestly, no. We trust each other a lot. We've known each other since we were 16. So we're now 27. There have been a few tense moments, I'll say, but most of the arguments we've had have been in our personal life. Not related to work.
If I knew Anthony when he was 16, that would not have been good.
If most of the people I know knew me when I was 16, they would not have liked me. I've definitely become a lot more mellow.
All right, they want me to fight with you, everybody. Everybody's telling me they're going to take my man card away. Everybody wants me to get ruthless with you. All right, so Bobby asks, all right, you guys want me to fight with him? I'll fight with him a little bit. I don't like confrontation on a show that I invited somebody on, but we could do it.
We disagree on like this much stuff.
Bobby wants to know, by what authority do your bishops declare the successor of Peter wrong? Go ahead, you guys want me to ask questions? Ask them. Let's go. We'll fight with our guests. You guys want it?
Yeah, I think that the response to that will be like, well, why is he the valid successor of Peter? If the successor of Peter is saying things that are heretical, is he a valid successor to the man?
Who declares heresy?
The church councils.
The church declares heresy. Yes. Right? The church declares heresy. And if they have a valid successor from, I mean, we say it in the Roman canon, like we've had continuous successors to the chair of Peter since Peter. So, I mean, I don't know how you can...
manner of succession has changed a number of times. There's been times when there were 2 popes. There was a time there were 3 popes. And then we get times when like Pope Honorius I was an out and out heretic. Pope Alexander VI, who we mentioned earlier, wasn't a heretic, but he was a fornicator. So I think
I have no issue with that though.
Yeah. Looking at the Catholic Church and saying like, hey, is this person, is the direction things are going really the way that Christ intended it? Because I think that that's really where the Orthodoxy splits off, where the Anglicans split off, is the chair of Peter and sitting in that seat enough to make somebody the successor of Peter?
I bet you there's some Catholics that would declare that questionable too. No, but I would say that the Catholic Church is the only one who has the ability to call a church council, right? So even the Orthodox, so like they try to make the claim that they paused in the 11th century and their liturgy is unchanged and all these things are unchanged. But but the world has changed a lot. And only the Catholic Church is able to call a council to bring the world's bishops together to address these issues.
I think what you mean when you say that only the church is able to, the Catholic Church is able to, I think you're really saying only the Catholic Church has successfully done so since the Seventh Ecumenical Council, right? Because I think the Orthodox would say they could, but yet they haven't.
They could not call a world council.
I agree with you, but I think they would claim otherwise.
Is that because they can't, or because if they did, the Catholic bishops wouldn't attend?
Modern bishops probably would attend.
That's the thing, is like if Leo XIV said, hey, we're pulling together an ecumenical council, we want Constantinople there, we want Canterbury there, we want Missouri there.
They did go. In the Second Vatican Council, there were Eastern patriarchs at the Second Vatican Council. So it's like, so
did they have a vote though?
I don't know if they were voting members, but that's not really how a council works either. It's not a democracy. It's more like documents are produced from the council, and then the Pope will sign off on them after the college
the
of
bishops sign, the college of bishops sign off on.
Also sign off on it. There has to be agreement upon what they're putting forth. But that's the thing. It's like the times where the church where the Pope actually acts in the manner you're saying, where he's spouting heresy, like that would be when the Pope is speaking infallibly is very, very rare. And when he's speaking ex cathedra, so from the chair, and he's saying this is binding on all the Christian faithful. So now, if you don't have that position in the church, how can there be unity? It's because I like Jonathan Peugeot a lot, but he's always talking about hierarchy and how things kind of work up, and they have to like if Christ doesn't have a prime minister upon the earth, who does get to say this is heresy, this is not? Like I don't see how any ecclesiology outside of Roman Catholicism could actually work. And when I say Roman Catholicism, I don't mean the Latin Church. I just mean with the Pope as head of the as the governing body over the entire church. It then comes down to, oh, we don't like what the Pope says, so we're going to break off and start our own thing. And I'm not saying you don't have a closer relationship to historical Christianity as an Anglo-Catholic. Of course you do, than a modern evangelical, because modern evangelicals, that theology is literally 100 years old. But I don't know how you can justify just saying, well, I don't agree with this thing, so we're going to go start our own thing.
I mean, I guess I can understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, do you understand the Protestant position that if the Catholic Church under the Pope says something that really seems to be at the very least improper, if not heretical, why should we respect that office? I mean, if the Pope were to, because if the
can you think of something offhand that you give me an example on that
as a
heresy that you think that the Pope is
the current Pope? I can't think of one, but no, like I said, Honorius the First, monothelitism.
Right. Okay. But his successor corrected that, right?
Yes, exactly. But what if he had declared ex cathedra? What if he had? But if he had, that's my point. Is
and even Honorius, I don't know the history of Honorius too well, but I don't know. I think his was. I'm pretty sure it was more just like a conceding to keep for the sake of unity type of thing, but he didn't like pronounce it or anything. I don't know Honorius that well. Yeah, he wouldn't declare it ex cathedra. I got Tim Gordon texting me.
Wouldn't, but he could, No,
but
we would claim he couldn't.
Yes, that's the claim, right? So the Catholic position is that the office, like the claiming the Pope has infallibility when speaking ex cathedra, is not saying the Pope can declare anything to be doctrine. It's saying that God prevents him from proclaiming a heresy.
Right. It's a negative charism.
And it doesn't do it for me. Like, I don't know what to tell you beside that. It's just saying that it can't happen because it can't happen is circular reasoning.
Well, it hasn't. That's why
we're saying it can't happen because God prevents it.
But God didn't prevent the College of Cardinals from electing multiple popes who were flagrant sinners.
Yeah,
but that's not what we claim. Right. Like you can have. That's the point. Is that you can have a guy like Pope Alexander VI who clearly had mistresses and he had children out of wedlock and all these things. But what he wasn't doing is changing church teaching to suit his lifestyle.
Sure, but again, somebody who is representative of Christ on earth should be as Christ-like as possible. And like with Urban II, he was literally insane. They elected an insane man for nepotism reasons.
We've had gay pedophiles as popes, but they didn't change the teaching of the church, is the point.
Until they did. And that's when things like the Council of Trent come about and the Anglicans go, okay, no.
Okay, so if the church council, like Trent, because you said the church councils are the ones who claim heresy,
the Protestants weren't given a vote there. The Protestants didn't have a say at the Council of Trent.
The whole point of the Council of Trent was to correct the Protestant errors. But it was still a valid church council, right? So, like,
I understand that, but if you're going to have a council and say, "Hey, we need to discuss these things," and then you don't give the people who are arguing with you a say, that's not.
They address their arguments specifically, though. Like that's what the Council of Trent is addressing the Protestant arguments specifically and saying this: if you believe this, you're accursed, right? So even you as an Anglo-Catholic, right? Like. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good question. Why is our ordination declared invalid?
I actually think isn't there a document specifically saying from the Catholic Church that the Anglican ordinations are invalid?
Yes, I can't remember it off the top.
If I remember correctly, it came about in the 1560s, and the reasoning was that we took out the submissiveness to the Pope. That bishops must be subservient to the Pope. That's about all.
That wouldn't invalidate their ordination, though, because the Orthodox ordinations are still valid and their sacraments are still valid.
So it was it was actually Leo the 13th in 1896, and the papal bull apostolic cure concluded that Anglican ordinations were absolutely null and utterly void due to defects in the form and intention of the Anglican ordination rite, particularly following changes made during the Reformation.
I very much love Leo the 13th because he's always extremely vague.
I mean, I bet the document.
I'm sure if you've read the document, it's not that vague.
I know, because here's the thing: I have read his. Was it him that did In Humanum Genus, or was it that Pius? Whichever one. When Pope Leo
generous.
When
that's Pius the 12th.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of for when they originally banned Freemasonry. But when Pope Leo the 13th comes along and reaffirms the papal ban on Freemasonry, his reasoning came entirely from a con artist who lied to him. And everything he said was like all of these things, and then he didn't actually give examples and evidence. And that's, I think, what bothers me is more from a logical point of view than a theological point of view. Is I need to see the explanation of why something is wrong, not just we decided this is wrong. And I think that that's the way a lot of Protestants feel. Is there's a lot of church decisions that they just say, and we have declared this anathema, and then they don't explain why.
See, I would take the opposite approach. I would say that the church is actually very thorough in explaining why those things are wrong.
So for instance, in the papal bull about the Anglican ordination, there was two main reasons given. One is that the Anglican Rite of Reformation, as revised during the Reformation, removed the references to the priest's role in offering the Eucharistic sacrifice. In other words, removed the references to the role in offering it as a propitiatory sacrifice. And then the second was that there was not enough elaboration to signify the order being conferred in the ordination. So in the Catholic ordination, it is specific whether that person is being ordained a deacon, priest, or bishop, and it was judged that the Anglican rite lacked that specificity.
But we do have deacons, priests, and bishops, and they're ordained as such.
It says that the phrase
it's the same reason why they call deacons fathers in the Anglican Church. Like Father Calvin Robinson was Father Calvin Robinson when he was just a deacon.
Interesting. Yeah, to be honest, I'm too new to it to really argue on that on the finer points of it.
Hang on, let me just say. Okay, so what is your take on? Have you ever read the Alta Vendita?
I can't say that I have.
You've never read the Alta Vendita. Rob, bring the Alta Vendita up. Because I've heard you say that Catholics are
against
Freemasonry. Yeah,
yeah. So I didn't know it by that name, but yeah, I've read some of it. It's nonsense. It's not Masonic. It was created by the church.
You think the Alta Vendita was created by the church and not by Freemasons?
Hang on, I might be mistaking it with something else, but yes, the author
100-year plan to get their own guy in, essentially.
Well, so that's the thing, is Freemasonry never had a problem with the Catholic Church. Like to this day, regular Freemasonry, which is mainly just the United States, Canada, and Britain, has no problem with the Catholic Church. There's no ban on Catholics. There was actually a ban on discussion of religion in the lodge and the discussion of politics in the lodge. What the Illuminati and the French Masons and to an extent the Italian Masons were doing in the 18 and 1900s actually is why we denounced them as a group. So, and like I said on the show last night, if I come to a point where I see something that is essential to Freemasonry, that is a core doctrine of Freemasonry, not just personal opinion about something, that were to contradict Christianity, I would walk away. I would leave in a heartbeat.
I think Go ahead, Rob.
I was just gonna say, I do think there is a conflation between like English and Scottish Rite Freemasonry with like the Oriental lodges.
Yeah.
Now I would say that the big problems with the Oriental lodges are still somewhat there in the English and Scottish Rite sort of.
I blame the Scottish Rite for that. Yeah.
But in terms of those who, you know, were responsible for, say, a lot of the violence against the church and like the French Revolution,
yeah,
and in, you know, the Italian Freemasons that like Garibaldi and those who fought against the church, those are the Oriental lodges, and they are the extremists in a sense.
I take a much more hardline stance on this than most Freemasons that I know, in that I don't think that Oriental lodges should be recognized as Masonic at all. I think that anything that isn't in perfect lockstep with the English branch, basically, is wrong. Almost in a very similar way to the way Catholics view Protestantism. I don't think that the French lodges are Masonic, because Masonry has a few core requirements. You have to believe in a God. The French don't require that. You have to be a man. The French don't require that. You're not allowed to talk about politics or religion in the lodge. The French actually encourage you to foment insurrection in the lodge. All of that is disgusting to me, and I hate it. For me, what I like about Freemasonry is the stuff that goes back really far. I think that after the year 1800, things kind of went off the rails. I think that the people who deny that the Illuminati influence remained within Freemasonry and that it permeated are insane. I think that that's exactly what the Scottish Rite is. I think that most Freemasons probably don't realize how bad the things they're involved in are. But on the other hand, if you're going to become a member of the Commandery, the Knights Templar in Freemasonry, you must be a Trinitarian Christian. So there's a very stark difference between the kind of almost more universalist, I wouldn't say Gnostic, but universalist position of the Scottish Rite, as opposed to the explicitly Trinitarian viewpoint of the York Rite.
To me, even the idea of like secret societies and stuff like that are I don't know enough about this, but I would think this is why the church was condemning them for hundreds of years. The Catholic Church has been condemning Freemasonry.
Yes, in 1738.
The idea that Protestants would mock the rituals of Catholicism and then go into these secret societies and then have their own rituals, it just seems so like contradictory to me.
I'm curious what you mean about mockery.
The Protestants in general don't like I'm talking about American Protestantism. I'm not talking about like Anglican and stuff like that. Like American Protestantism, they don't like liturgical Christianity. But then they came here, like the Puritans came here, and they started all these secret societies with it and doing all these rituals behind closed doors. But I think ritual is actually inherent in humanity. Like God made us to perform rituals and stuff like that. But I mean, I just know the church has explicitly condemned Freemasonry for the past 300 years or so.
Yeah, and to be honest, in a weird way, like I said, if I found Freemasonry to be in contradiction with my Christian faith, I would walk away immediately. But in a weird way, one of my biggest issues with Catholicism has come through the way that they have responded to Freemasonry over the years. Primarily with, for example, I can't remember the Latin term for it, but what Pius wrote in 1738. If you read it, his reasoning is literally just they meet in secret, therefore they must be doing evil and perverse things. But in reality, it was a membership only organization. You couldn't be in it if you couldn't come into a meeting if you weren't a member. It wasn't that they were deliberately keeping secrets from each other or from the outside world. It was like, this is a membership society that helps each other do things, that discusses things that are kind of close to the best for the members, things that, you know, might be private. And so you can't come into the lodge if you're not a member, because the lodge does things with its money, like to support each other. So why would you be able to just walk in?
You would take an issue with the documents where the church was trying to say we like we view the Muslims with esteem and things like that. So you're like adamant that I agree, Muslims do not worship God.
They don't.
But then you're a Freemason where you're specifically in a group that's saying, like, because they push human fraternity, like amongst, like, you're not allowed. So how do you have that contradiction that like, you want to be part of a Christian church that explicitly says the Muslims don't worship God, but then you're I don't know.
Oh no, I think that is a major contradiction within Freemasonry that developed later on. When in 1723 the Masonic Constitution comes about and it says that Freemasonry is open to all faiths, I think that there's something very important to recognize about that. All faiths, for practical purposes, in England in 1723 was Anglicanism and Roman Catholicism. That was why they opened it up to all faiths, was because they were in the midst of a severe series of civil conflicts over the Protestant and Catholic positions. So what they were doing is saying, hey, we're not going to let whether or not we're Protestant or Catholic divide us because we're all Christians. Over time, as the diversity of religion grew, there were probably some moments where Freemasonry should have stopped and said, no, we're not going to let Hindus in. No, we're not going to let Muslims in. No, we're not going to let Norse pagans in. And I think I can't, there are things I can't defend about the way modern Freemasonry operates in a lot of ways. There are a lot of people I know through Masonry who are good people, but I don't think that they belong in Freemasonry. I think that they are bringing things into it that they want to see justified, when in reality, that's not what Freemasonry was supposed to be about. It was supposed to be a group of Christian men working together in concert to both keep each other safe and provide for one another in times of hardship, and to also go out and do charity and to work together to better their communities. I think that was the original intention, and we've fallen away from that. So as far as Freemasonry goes, I'm a reformist.
You're a Protestant Freemason.
I'm a Protestant Freemason, in a way, yeah. And I've gotten to a point recently where I feel like if I get through, and this really is where I'm sitting on it, if I get up through Knights Templar, and I'm sitting up there, the tippy top of that chain of Freemasonry, and I look down and I see that there's no hope for it, I'll walk away. That's kind of how I felt for years.
Christian Marion wants to know if you'll debate Freemasonry with him.
Yeah, I'd be willing to.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh man, I don't know.
I think Albert Pike was the worst thing to ever happen to Freemasonry.
He was a weird one. Yeah,
he's a weird, incredible scholar, by the way. Like, as far as ethnography goes, like this is like an ancient anthropologist term, but as an anthropologist, basically, incredibly important figure, very important in recording. I think it was the language of, I want to say it was the Seminoles, some of the Muskogean Creek languages. We know a lot of what we know because of Albert Pike, but at the same time, he got way too into the theater kid aspect of Freemasonry and forgot that you're supposed to be a Christian. And he says, I'm a Christian. He says, I believe in God. He's just a little too into the mysticism.
What's your position on the people of the Old Covenant being involved in Freemasonry?
I haven't had any issues with any of them.
No, well, I mean, so a lot of people are saying that it's very Kabbalist. Like, so
I think that has more to do with Christian mysticism than it does Jewish influence. Looking back through it, like Albert Pike, when he talks about Kabbalah, he's talking about Christian Kabbalah, which of course is based upon Jewish Kabbalah, but he wasn't doing it as like Judaism is, like Christianity is wrong, Judaism is right, Kabbalah, all of that. It was kind of the extension of it. So I don't think that the changes to Freemasonry are the result of Jewish influence so much as Christian mystic.
And I just see, I see oh man, we can't do this on this side. We'll have to do this on the other side because we'll talk about world events too. Because I think all of us are pretty disgusted with what we're seeing happening in the world right now. So we can probably agree on that. All right, guys, if you got a couple last questions before we jump over to locals. Yeah, thing is, we wanted to have Aidan on just to shoot the crap with him before the debate, like just to talk to him about his podcast and stuff, and then the debate happened. And I do think that Tim Gordon did really the best out of the three of you on that debate. I think you were kind of outmatched. You didn't know what you were getting yourself into. I think Jay jumped in way too deep and got way too esoteric to even make the conversation like cognizable for the average person watching. But Jay does that when he debates, and then that's because we've had Jay on twice, and I refuse to have a discussion about orthodoxy with him because I know it'll just get like that. But I think Tim came out looking like he actually understood the arguments the best and had the best replies for everything. And I think that Jay purposely chose the hardest things for a Catholic like Tim, who's tradition minded, to defend those positions. So let's see if we got any quick questions before we go. Does Aidan know that the Dictatus Papae was never an official document of the church and has stuff that Catholics don't believe in and have never believed in?
Saying it was never an official document, I feel like is a cop-out. It was put together by Gregory VII. It was the positions he held. While the document itself wasn't published, most of the stuff in it was in other encyclicals and indexes and papal documents. So yes, the Dictatus Papae itself wasn't published as it stands in, I think, like 27 articles, but most of those articles were published elsewhere.
All right, let's see if you guys got any others before we jump to the other side, because I want to talk about the war that we seem to be getting pushed into right now.
Yeah, I'm draft age.
Yeah,
that sucks.
Yeah, I'm getting closer to not being. I'm going to be 28 in a few months.
Oh, all right, Bobby's got one. What's the point of the hidden teachings and veiled symbolism restricted to Masons if it's just supposed to be a Christian fraternity? Like it sounds to me like you were saying like what Freemasonry was supposed to be. Just sounds like you guys should have all just been Catholic, and that's exactly what you had in the Catholic Church.
I think to an extent the reason Freemasonry became popular was because it was a way for Christians to meet. While you weren't supposed to discuss religion as an official business of the lodge, inside of the lodge, like building, you could meet as Protestant and Catholic and talk about things. So it was a way to kind of keep the faith together, even with that split going on, which is probably more popular with Protestants than it is with Catholics. But when the organization began around 1400 in the Regius poem, it's an explicitly Catholic document. Everybody was still Catholic at the time. So what they say is that, a Mason must love God and the Holy Church with all his heart. It's a very explicitly Christian fraternity at the time. And a lot of that, the symbolism and everything wasn't supposed to be hidden or secret. It was more a matter of, teaching lessons without just teaching lessons. It was everything in Masonry is a play. Like all of the degrees and everything are just play acting. That is meant to teach a lesson about such and such thing. And at least in the York Rite, I haven't done the Scottish Rite stuff. I've read some of it, but in the York Rite, there was nothing in it that wasn't purely based in the Bible. Most of it's based around the Temple of Solomon. Actually, and I saw that on the screen. My grandfather was a third degree Knight of Columbus. Realistically, for me, it's like I think it's a little silly to join the Catholic version of the thing that already exists. I would prefer to see Masonry return to its roots and be the organization it was meant to be, rather than be something weird, which is what it's become.
All right. We're going to go over to the other side. Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't have a fight over here, guys. I know you guys were all hoping for that. I'm not going to invite somebody on my show and have a fight. It's different if you said it as a debate, but like we specifically said, we weren't having a debate tonight. We were just having them on to talk.
Yeah, we all know what our positions are, you know.
Yeah,
none of us are theologians.
Yeah, well, especially because you are kind of just delving into apostolic Christianity and you've found the Anglican Catholic communion, that's just where you are right now. I don't think you'll stay there. Like, I think you're going to have to see the preposterous nature of breaking away from Rome always kind of devolves into something. And you'll see it, like, even within the Anglican community, it's like, oh, well, they went too far, let's go start our own group. Oh, well, they went too far, let's go start our own group. And that can only go on for so much. Like, there has to be a final authority in the end.
There is a conservative movement in the Episcopal Church right now, and I was talking with somebody about it, and I was like, well, why not, instead of trying to reform the Episcopal Church from the inside, why not everybody switch over to the Anglican Church, the Anglican Catholic Church, and just overwhelm them with numbers?
Well, that's my position on the Catholic Church. It's like,
I guess the Episcopal Church like has a really good job of like keeping everything it owns.
You should check out the Anglican Ordinariate if you like the
Anglican patrimony.
The Anglican patrimony. Check out the Anglican Ordinariate. It's like the best of both worlds. You get to be in communion with Rome and keep all of the things you like about the Anglican Catholic communion. But all right, we're going to go over to the other side. Guys, go to recuscentsellers.com. Use code BASED at checkout for 10% off. They have a fine assortment of wines and fruit over there. They're our sponsor. We love them. You have an obligation to support Catholic businesses that support us. I don't care. It's a mortal sin to not buy wine from them.
To clarify what Anthony just said, you should support Catholic businesses. You don't have an obligation to support them that support us.
No, you do. Don't listen to Rob. He's always trying to undermine our grift. Don't listen to him. All right, we're gonna go over to locals. If you guys want to come over there, I want to talk about current events. So we'll see you guys over on the other side. Take us out, Rob.